Santita Jackson Show on AM950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. I hope you all are doing well today. Let's talk about the Crumblies in Michigan. Should parents be held responsible for the misdeeds of their children? And when we dig down into this case, yeah, I think you might believe that they should be. They were abusive parents, neglectful parents. Um, when you look at it's a very, very painful case to watch, but it's something that we need to look at nonetheless. And then we'll be talking about all of these credit card defaults with Dr. Max Wolf. Yeah, they're happening all over the country. They are sharply, sharply, sharply on the rise. Why is that? Because people don't have any money. And you keep hearing about how great the economy is doing. Well, you know how it's the law of averages. If you have a really big number up top and you have even small numbers at the bottom, when you average it out, it'll look like everybody's doing okay. That's pretty much what's happening here. So when you hear about the economy and, oh my goodness, it's going so well, it's going very well for the billionaire class and the 100 millionaire class and people who are wealthy, but it's not going well for most people. It's not going well for most people. So let's talk about that, everybody. Let's talk about that with Dr. Max Wolf. And are you defaulting on your credit cards? It's happening all over the place. The thing is, you go from, as Lynn Richardson writes in her book, from payday to Monday. Most people are struggling. So let's talk about that today on the Santita Jackson Show. Let's get right to some of these headlines, everybody. Some of these headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. And we're going to be talking with Pastor Darius Brooks shortly, getting some good news from him. First up, the Supreme Court will consider Donald Trump's eligibility to be president. The court will hear arguments about Colorado banning the former president from its primary ballot because of his role in the January 6th attack on the Capitol. The case, which hinges on a part of the Constitution barring insurrectionists from office, could determine Trump's status as a candidate nationwide. Let me know over here on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. On the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, let me know what you think. Should he be banned from participating in the election? What do you think? How do you think that's going to settle in on about half of America who wants him in? At least half of America. What do you think? Should lawyers decide this or should you? Let me know. Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Of course, continue to tune in on AM950 Radio or AM950Radio.com. Trump is the Republican frontrunner, so we will see. Israel's prime minister called a ceasefire proposal from Hamas delusional. It's a three-part proposal, everybody. The group's demands include the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza. But Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday vowed to continue fighting. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been visiting the region, working on a deal to release Israeli hostages and ease the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Senate Republicans blocked a $118 billion border bill yesterday. Bill which paired border security measures with funding for Ukraine and Israel. I don't know why they continue to twin those, but they're doing it. It lost support after Trump criticized it. He has made the border a core 2024 campaign issue. The Senate will move forward on a bill to fund Ukraine's war against Russia that does not include the border security measures. 5 Marines are missing. We're praying for their families, everybody, after they flew during the California storm. They were on a helicopter flying from Nevada to California on Tuesday. The aircraft was found yesterday, but a search for the troops continues. Wow, it brought record rainfall. This storm out in California, it rained for days, everybody. Fierce winds and heavy mountain snow in California are expected later on this week. Native Americans have the least access to the National Liver Transplant List. This is very important. They have the highest rate of death from liver disease, but they are the least likely to get on the list. Let me say that again. Native Americans have the highest rate of death from liver disease, but are the least likely to get on the list to get a transplant, according to an analysis by the Washington Post and the markup. Getting on the list typically includes a doctor's referral, difficult for people without money. The only cure for end-stage liver disease is a transplant. Why is it that they have the least access when they have the greatest need? Sounds familiar, everybody. Minneapolis-St. Paul, 51 degrees, light rain. In sports, the Timberwolves will be playing the Bucks in Milwaukee, and the Wild are triumphant over Chicago 2-1. Let me pull up Pastor Darius Brooks so that we can get some good news from him today. Uh, it's a joy to be with you. I want you all to go to the Santita Jackson Show. Please like and share, like and share, like and share on the Santita Jackson and Friends page, but also like and subscribe on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. The Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Everybody like and share. We're talking about the Crumblies today. Should parents be responsible for the misdeeds of their children? Ethan Crumbley walked into his high school and killed 4 people, having complained of hallucinations, but his parents laughed those off. Having been neglected by his parents. In fact, psychiatrists called him a feral child. What is that? That's a child who's basically been raised in the wild. No one took care of him. Wow. Yeah, those are the kind of parents that he has. And then the father bought him a gun. And then the counselors went to the parents and said, hey, we got a problem. And they laughed it off. Yeah, absolutely, they're responsible. You should not have children and just drop them in the sea. You should have children and raise them. Pastor Darius Brooks, how are you today?
Good morning. I hope all is well. I'm very good today.
You know what? Do me a favor. I want you to turn up your volume as high as you can and make sure you're not on an earpiece so that we can get this as clearly. That is much, 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 much better. Let's just make sure no one's on an earpiece today and that you have your volume up as high as you can. Pastor Darius Brooks, you are passing out food at Grace Central here in Illinois, just outside of Chicago, Westchester, Illinois, Tuesdays and Wednesdays. Am I right?
Absolutely. Every Tuesday from 5 till 7, and every Wednesday from noon till 2 for the seniors. Grace Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois. It's right off of 290 and Manhattan and Santita. We do that every week. If you know anybody who needs food, Grace Central Church, 10216 South Kitchener Street, Westchester, Illinois. GraceCentral.net. GraceCentral.net. That's 10216 South Kitchen Street, Westchester, Illinois. Every Tuesday from 5 till 7, and every Wednesday from noon till 2 for seniors, so they won't be out. Indeed, I'm excited about the word, just explaining it so people can understand this journey we call life. Wonderfully, not just about what you're talking about, but in every area of our lives. God is just so real. And I'm not talking about a religious position. I think people mess up here when they keep making God religious. He's not religious. He's not a religious God. He's a God of life. He's a God of joy, peace, love, and life in it more abundantly, physically, mentally, emotionally, financially, spiritually, socially, culturally, verbally, sexually, professionally. He says in all of our ways, we're to acknowledge him and he'll direct our path. Unfortunately, sometimes that's even we don't use in some of our ways. Just talking about what you was talking about today about parents being responsible, not just killing, but financially, information, teaching them accountability, responsibility, training. It's in the Word of God. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Meaning the training that you taught them, which is why God's Word, getting into His Word, is so important. And somebody saying, "I have Jesus," or "I got Jesus," or even kind of judging God, Jesus, being ignorant of what this process is all about. He's supposed to come into our lives first with compassion, teaching us how to even change ourselves or mature as different individuals. You didn't mess me up with this topic this morning about these parents, because absolutely they're responsible for the outcome of these children. Now, wonderfully studying the Word of God when a child reaches 12 years old, when a child can differentiate what's right and wrong, because God put His Spirit in them. They're to be obedient to God, even if parents don't teach and train them. But parents need to understand clearly that how your child turns out has a great deal to do with the first 7 to 11 years of their lives. It's in the Bible. I might not even get to the message today.
No, wait. That is a message. Because let me just say this. Because on and on and on, we hear, for example, that Black fathers are irresponsible. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention showed that the most responsible father in America, the most involved father in America, is the Black father. We're telling a lot of lies. And then you see these parents who neglect their child. This child hates himself. He said, my parents hate me. My goodness, come on. They did train the child, and look at where he ended up. He ended up murdering. Come on, Pastor Brooks.
Well, I want to make sure we're clear on the process. I don't know what his parents done.
No. This is what the psychiatrist. And this was
again, Santita, there go another way of seeing things. A psychiatrist's way of telling Santita how her parents, how Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson and Jacqueline Jackson trained you. That's his perspective.
Mm-hmm.
The only way we can tell whether Santita was trained well by Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson and Jackson is Santita's actions.
Yeah.
Santita, your father and your mother, you're on radio right now. My father, my mother, I'm doing gospel. There's all that getting understanding my point to you is this person that kill people. That's not of God. Mm-hmm. That can't be training. So his perspective is right. But when you really get into the grinds of these things, killing is not of God.
No, it's not, but that's how he was trained. If your parents laugh when the counselors come to you and say, he's talked about killing people, and they laugh about it. Something.
That's an ungodly position, absolutely. And that definition of training, you are absolutely right. You and I talk about it. God says the way he trains, that doesn't happen. But you got people, absolutely, which is why the word of God says, all that called on or will not enter to the kingdom of God. Santita is right there, which Santita, what you and I are saying is people of God, we got to open up our heads, our hearts to understand God's language. That although we want to do what's right, there are people in the world who don't. Not a criticism, just an observation. They ain't scared of nobody and they hate nobody. And the more we come together as believers, where there's unity, there is strength, we can at least within ourselves stop this stuff. Which the message is going to be today: go into all nations, teaching them to observe all things, baptizing them in the name of the Father. So we that are strengthened in and through God's word, we come together to make this thing work for us, and then we're able to be an objective to others to see this is how you do this. Other than that, all of us giving in and fitting in and trying to be like the world, they'll never see Jesus. They'll never try to do things that way. Everybody's trying to win, and everybody's trying to get money. Everybody's trying to get paid, even in church. It's crazy out here. But you are absolutely right. You cannot train a person godly and things turn out where somebody else got to be subjected to their ungodly training. It's in the word of God, which is why I teach like I teach, which is why I'm still serving, because people come, I introduced to serving these people. These people come to food pantries or Mercedes and church. You don't know what people are going through to serve. Keep serving. He that is great among you, let him be a server. He that is great among you, you keep fighting. He that is great among you, you stay in this course that God says. He has the specific outcome. We can't give up. We can't throw in the towel. Santita, you right, that's a message in itself. Girl, I ain't even teach what I prepared to teach.
Yeah, you did.
But you are absolutely right. Being on you on the radio, sharing with people, you have to train our children. Your daddy, girl, I'm about to shout. Your daddy told me, I think you and I shared this conversation before. A young lady came to push and said, Reverend Jackson, please help me with my son. He's just all out of control. Your daddy began his wisdom, looked at that woman and said, how old is your son? And she said, Reverend, he's 21. And your dad, with a straight face, looked at that woman and said, God didn't give him to you at 21. People of God, we can't straighten our kids out after they get 17, 18. They already got their personalities established. And for the rest of the generation, whoever families on here, you got to start. Don't you pay attention to this world. Teach your children accountability, responsibility as much as it takes. Teach the young kids that are young, having babies. We got to get them Santita and tell them, y'all got past y'all parents, but let's make sure our grandkids or your grandkids don't get into this thing. We got a chance. If we do it, we got a little chance. That you don't care what nobody says. As long as I got breath in my body, I'm going to do what God say do. Do the little things I need to do to make this thing happen. If all of us can do that, we can still turn this thing around with God's help. We can't do it without him. When you get through talking, we can't do it without him.
Well, you know what? Amen. I mean, really, I think that's the word today. Because that is what we're talking about. The thing is, it concerns me. It concerns me greatly. When I see what happened to this boy, It's easy to blame this child. But when you see what he says about himself, how he hates himself, how he felt his parents hated him, a feral child is a child who's been abandoned, left in the wild. They've been left without human contact. Who does that? Who does that? And then his mother comes to court and says she wouldn't change a thing. Oh, no, no. You need to go to jail for life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And unfortunately, because I don't know if he's over there. You understand, they're responsible or should be, especially with testimonies like that. Oh, the message Sunday is going to be all soldiers report for duty. That's
Thank
going to be
you.
the message.
Thank you.
We got to do this because we got to stop stuff like this. Come on, we ain't going to church. We getting out of church. Ain't nobody getting. Listen, if any man be in Christ, he's a new creature. You better find you a good church to get in here so we can utilize the word to stop this stuff because these people ain't playing out here.
No, they're not.
Then Santita, they are not. They watch this. Legions and wicked people operate in God's word. I'm gonna tell you something. Great Central Sunday. Don't us come together. You got wicked people who will come, not a criticism, just an observation. It's a talk show, Santita. You got wicked people that will come together to be strong, wicked, and if we're not careful, they will win. The word of God says where there's unity, there is strength. People of God, I don't care who you don't like, if you find a church or pastor doing something good, and you can see it with your natural eyes, go support them so we can be straight in this thing to make a difference. Because the enemy's job is division. Santita, the enemy's job is to divide. Santita, you and I are friends. Any way the enemy can come in between dividing you and I with small stuff, that's what his job is. People of God, we have got to come together just on GP to make a difference and to do it in this thing because these wicked people out here ain't playing. In court, talking about they wouldn't change a thing, and then you got judges in these places who agree with them and case dismissed. Something's wrong with this picture.
No, it's wrong. And I want to thank you for being with us today. I want you to let us know how we can worship with you and how we can get that food.
Grace Central Church, 10216 South Kitchen Street, Westchester, Illinois, every Tuesday from 5 till 7 for adults and Wednesdays for seniors, noon till 2, and we don't turn anybody away. You know, anybody who needs food, y'all, been in the Grace Central, and if you need a word from the Lord that makes sense, truth has no face, no friends, no fear, no feelings, that truth takes nobody's side. As a matter of fact, 2 + 2 is 4 with a fever. Even a crazy person with the truth got to act right. I'm telling you what I know, not what I heard. Come on Sunday morning, get a great word. We handing out 10 till 12:30 on Sunday morning. You just get a great word, God's word, that help us make sense out of this journey we call life.
That's right. This is that Darius Brooks. Your will is what's best for me. Safe in his arms. The Tommies. Go to DariusBrooks.com so you can find out where the Tommies are, so you can get to his church, and so that you can be blessed. I'm sending you so much love today. And I'm bringing up Dr. Shanita Knighton right now, just so that we can get a word from her this morning, because oh gosh, there's just so much going on, everybody. And I want you all to tell me what you think about this Crumbley case, because it is heartbreaking. The more that I read about this boy, the more, because I had to refresh my mind, because, of course, we remember when the case happened. It happened several years ago now. But I said, wait a minute, hold on. As I always go back to the original articles. And I said, I just remember how neglectful his parents were. And you have to go back into real time. And I said, wait a minute. We need to look at the fact that his parents neglected him. They neglected him. So much so that the psychiatrist said he was raised like an animal, raised out in the woods, abandoned, no human contact. Who does that? Who does that? So you know what? You tell me what you think. Do you think that this case was decided appropriately? You let me know what you think. Reach out to me on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Was this case decided appropriately? I think that it was. But this boy's in jail for the rest of his life without parole. What about his parents? And then his parents went to court and separated themselves from each other because they started to blame each other. No wonder this child struggled the way that he did. We'll get Dr. Knighton another day. But this is a whole lot to take in. So I want you to reach out to me and let me know what you think about this case. Let me know what you think about this case. Um, I'm going to get Attorney C.K. Hoffler up because she's been covering this on court TV rather extensively. And I want to know what her thoughts are. I mean, what about the jury finding Jennifer Crumbley guilty of involuntary manslaughter? What's next for these parents? What about these parents being considered, I mean, they're neglectful. They abandoned him. They had no human contact with him. What did they do? A feral child? Well, that's parental abandonment. That is, when you see children who've been raised in the wild, those are feral children. Raised in the wild, no human contact. The parents had them and dropped them in the middle of nowhere. That's what happened to this boy. And he even feels so badly about himself. He said, I am a really bad person. He wasn't even 21 when he said that. How you have this boy had hallucinations and his parents would not get him attended to. The officials at the school, the counselor said, he's got a problem. And you buy him a gun? He's got a mental health problem. He wants to be violent toward people. Are you serious? Oh, no. C.K. Hoffler?
Good morning, Santita. How are you?
I am doing fine. I know I've called you up a little bit early, but I wanted to get right into this case. We're going to have some other people who are going to be joining us. But you've been covering the Crumbley case, Jennifer and James Crumbley, the Michigan shooter, the father and mother of Ethan Crumbley. You've been following this case rather exclusively, and not exclusively, but in great detail. And you have been talking about this on court TV. I had to refresh my memory. I had to kind of go back down memory lane, as Minnie Riperton used to say, to go back to the early, I always read, part of the way I research everything, everybody, is to go back to that's why I have so many papers. I get the first writing of a story. Because after they write it, the first time they start editing it, changing it around, they get more information, but they also start changing the story around. I want to see what y'all first said about it. And the first thing that was said was, when you saw this timeline, CK, it is so damning. These parents, how do you raise a feral child? That's a child that you have in the wild and drop out in the streets, CK. That's someone who's been unraised. If you don't mind, I'm going to try and bring on Ari Bloomcats. Hold on. But I don't know. Well, we're looking at all of these stories about every time. I mean, Jonathan has been in, my brother, Congressman Jonathan Jackson has been in Congress, and he has been saying that, some of his conservative colleagues with whom he's quite friendly, in the middle of a conversation will say, well, what about black fathers? I'm like, you all don't bring up James Crumbley? You don't bring up Thomas Jefferson?
Morning.
Ari Bloomcats at Santita Jackson on the Santita Jackson Show. How are you?
Doing all right. How are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, sweetie. We're talking about this Crumbley case. We've got attorney C.K. Hoffler with us, and we're going to bring up Dwight McKee in a hot second, and then we're going to get this started. Now, CK, for her portion, Ari has been analyzing this case on court TV. And so we're going to get her legal opinion, but I want to get your thoughts about this case. I mean, as a reporter, as a human being, because the more that I had to go back and read up on Ethan, and it broke my heart to see how abused this boy was. I'm not excusing him killing these people. I'm not excusing him. Dwight McKee, we're up on the air. I'm about to bring you up right now. You're on with Ari Bloomcats and C.K. Hoffler as we talk about Ethan Crumbley and his parents, Jennifer and James Crumbley. His father, James Crumbley, is about to go on trial, involuntary manslaughter, or if those are the charges. But let's start, just talk to us. I mean, the father bought the son a gun, knowing that the son has been having hallucinations and all kinds of trouble. Just walk us through the basic facts of the case, C.K. Hoffler.
Well, certainly. Well, and I did cover the Ethan Crumbley's case as well as his mother's case Jennifer Crumbley for Court TV. And his father's case, as you all know, was coming up. So Ethan Crumbley was 17 years old. And as you all know, he went to his school. I'm going to get this the basics, and then I'm going to do the backdrop. He went to a school and he shot and killed 4 students at Oxford High School in Michigan. It's outside of Detroit, and injured several others. So what's important to know about Ethan Crumbley is that he was very disturbed on the one hand, and I have a certain interpretation having looked at the evidence and covered his trial, his sentencing, and his mother's trial. On the other hand, his parents took him to a shooting range on multiple occasions. His father went with him to a shop, purchased a gun, a handgun, the handgun that ultimately killed those children. They took him to a gun range on multiple occasions, and there was evidence that came out in the mother's case about this, where they are taking him and making sure that he knows how to shoot this gun. They also, on the day of the shooting, because the school noticed that there was something very, very bizarre, so they took him to get a gun. The father gave him a gun. The mother was very complicit as well. They took him to a shooting range many times. Sometimes the mother took him, sometimes the father took him, sometimes they took him together. He was very, very good and precise at shooting. But the most damning piece of evidence against the mother, Jennifer Crumbley, and the father, but since the mother has now been convicted, was this drawing that he did, that the principal and the school officials found. It was a drawing that basically detailed his state of mind, which was the state of mind of someone who was very troubled. There was a drawing, and I will never forget this drawing, a drawing of the head. It looked like a little girl, and then he wrote on top of there something to the effect of he wanted to shoot someone who was pretty and smart because he wanted to make him in the back of the head, and there's a gun pointing to the head. This is a drawing that the school folks found and that he had, and they summoned the parents to the school the day of the shooting. This is where they can never escape. They're both going to be convicted. Well, we know the mother was convicted, but the father's going to be convicted too. So they go to the school, this is before the shooting, with their child who has a backpack, and the principal notes, by the way, oh, his backpack's a little heavy. Does the principal, having seen this drawing, knowing that obviously he's troubled, anyone who does that drawing is troubled, is having a moment. The principal sits down and talks to the parents. He does know that the backpack is a bit heavy, but he never looks in the backpack. And that's number one. Number two, they sit and they talk to the parents. And how do I know this? Because he testified on the stand. He talks to the parents about the drawing, how disturbing it is, and the parents make a decision to allow him to stay in school. But it's not, and so that is where the mother's culpability comes in, and why, in part, why she was convicted of involuntary manslaughter, 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter for each of the persons that he killed. But in my impression, the school was on the hook, because why a principal, a school official, administrator seeing that drawing would not refuse to allow that child to go to school is beyond me. That drawing is very, very disturbing. And it lays out exactly what he was going to do, his mindset, his mentality, and there's a picture of a gun. The parents know that he has a gun, or has access to a gun. Why? Because he went with his father to purchase a gun. His father had to be there because he was a minor. And they got the gun. And they took him to the shooting range. And it wasn't just a gun that he practiced on. So the point is right there, right before the shooting, both the parents and the school had the ability, they could have reasonably avoided what happened, at least on that day. So the fact that Jennifer Crumbley was convicted was not a surprise to me. I fully expected her to be convicted, especially if you saw some of the chilling footage at the shooting range. And sometimes I don't know why people think that they're not being recorded when they go into public places. They are being recorded, and those recordings were submitted and turned over to the police, and that's what we saw. In addition to very, very disturbing messages The mother, when the father and Ethan were going to get the gun, the mother knew this. She was really complicit. So you can't say, they moved to sever the trial so the mother and father wouldn't be tried together because the rationale was they had different levels of culpability. Well, in my view, both of them were going down. The father's going down like the mother went down. And the mother somehow thought that because she wasn't there with him to purchase the gun, maybe, I suppose that she's saying maybe, she didn't have as much culpability. The problem is there are text messages where she's confirming with her husband that he's got the gun, that the gun was purchased. So so those are the basic facts. How he was treated in his home, how he was raised in his home, he was crying out for help. He was a child crying out for help. They didn't give him the kind of help that he needed, and these are people that had the resources to give him the help that he needed. They certainly had the resources to buy a gun. They certainly had the resources to go to a shooting range on multiple occasions. They certainly had the resources to buy the bullet. They certainly had the resources to do all of those things, but yet they didn't give him the kind of counseling and support that he needed. But this is the thing that I also will say. While he was deeply troubled, Ethan probably did know the difference between right and wrong.
Mm-hmm.
He knew that what he was doing was wrong. So when you have mental incapacity, like when you plead, when you admit to a crime and say, but in your defense is by reason of mental insanity, mental incapability, whatever different jurisdictions call it, something different. It's because a lot of times the psychiatrists and psychologists say they don't know the difference between right and wrong. That was not the case here. Ethan probably clearly knew the difference between right and wrong. He had a plan, executed a plan to perfection. He had a drawing of what he wanted to do that reflected his mindset, and he went out and did it. He shot with precision. Why? Because at the shooting range, he shot with precision. He was very good, very focused. It's disturbing to see how precise he was at the shooting range, because that is what he did to those children. He pointed, he aimed, he shot, and he killed. So that to me, yes, he deserves to be, in my impression, even though he was a minor, he deserves to be in jail for life without the opportunity of parole, and that's what he got. He said he was a bad person. Yes, he's a bad person. His mother deserves, 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. Maybe they will amend the counts with his father, but I think that was proper. I think the jury ruled correctly, and I didn't think going into the trial, based on the knowledge that I had at that point, that she had a chance of not being convicted.
What is involuntary manslaughter before I ask Ari Boomkatz his assessment? What is that? What's the difference between that and second-degree murder, first-degree murder? Do you think it was an appropriate charge?
I think it was an appropriate charge. It could have been a different charge. Involuntary manslaughter, because of the fact that they did not pull the trigger. So first-degree murder, you have to have intent, you have to have all of these things, but you have to have intent and then mentally have to commit the crime. That's Ethan Crumbley. The parents did not have the gun and shoot those children and injure others. They were not. Their son did. So it's involuntary, meaning you don't have to have the intent to kill, but you have to have been so reckless as they were, so grossly negligent as they were, as to have facilitated what happened. It's a lesser offense with lesser significance, but she is going to jail. The sentencing will come up, but my prediction is she's going to get the maximum. So voluntary is when you intentionally do it, first degree, second degree, and every jurisdiction, some jurisdictions they can define it differently, but involuntary typically is when you're one step removed. Sometimes with people, it's an accident. Sometimes, in this case, it was an accident, gross negligence, that type of thing. So a lot of times just the involuntary, and that's a very broad description, because as I said, different states define it differently, have different elements, but the concept is they were not the shooter, but they facilitated the shooting through their reckless disregard for human life, through their gross negligence. So that's the distinction.
Well, Donnie D says government impact upon parents, restricting discipline within reason. I'm sorry, as I do not agree with the mother's conviction. Examine a case from years ago wherein a young Floridian 11-year-old male child was allowed to divorce his parents successfully. children know that they're not being treated well, and they sue to be emancipated. One of my dearest friends did the same thing after having been sexually abused by her father, having been impregnated by him. Wow. Robert Williams says the name crumbling, the optics already isn't in their favor. He says he agrees with the conviction, unlike Donnie D. He talks about sorry parents in Highland Park who let their son, of course, open fire on people on the 4th of July a couple of years ago, as you remember. And so, I mean, you tell me, Ari Bloomkatz, what do you make of this case? And and do you think it was properly reported?
Thanks so much, and great to be on with everyone this morning. I don't want to suggest in any way here that we ignore the role of personal responsibility or that we ignore the actions of him and his parents whatsoever at all. And I think that, these are really important actions that happened and that, led to these deaths and these murders. And it's just devastating on so many levels. But, I'm struck in reading about this. I'm struck by some of the statements from some of the parents here as well, including the statements by Bob Meyer, who is the father of Tate Meyer, who was killed here. And, Bob Meyer talks here about wanting to see accountability for what he calls whole systemic failure around this. And I think that's something that's also important to think about and consider here. We had some 350 school shootings across the country in 2023. That's almost one a day. We have a culture of gun violence in the United States that is increasing and rising all the time, especially as we see conservative lawmakers loosen restrictions for guns, help preserve loopholes for purchasing guns, and all sorts of things of that nature. And so I think one of the things that I'm thinking about here is not only the role of personal responsibility in all of this, but also the role of systemic responsibility here as well, and what we can do overall as a country to stop this incredibly prevalent tide of shootings that we're seeing year after year after year right now. And I've covered many of these shootings. Reporter hopped in a car, traveled around the United States for a couple of weeks, talking to as many people as we could about, what is it that is triggering the United States? What is it that is this gun culture that we have? We spoke with so many folks, including, the poet and thinker Nikki Giovanni and Richard Latek and so many others, Howard Zinn, Robert Jensen in Texas. We went to site after site of shootings, of school shootings, trying to gain some kind of understanding of what was happening, what was going on. And I have to be honest that, we saw such tragedy with the Columbine, we saw such tragedy, and we saw such hurt and such pain. And I think that's something that's a takeaway for me here too, is that, we have these instances again and again and again. We have, these horrible things like Sandy Hook and all of it. And I think as a country, we sometimes move on from these things and we forget the lasting pain and the deep, deep impact that these shootings have, not only on these families, but on these communities and on, the rest of us, and the trauma that really sort of gets ingrained in our beings from all of it. And I think that's, something I'm trying to consider here and something I'm trying to think about. And I don't have, too many answers about any of this. And I think a lot of us are sort of at a loss of how we begin to get a handle on this, where we begin to target things. But one of the things here that is so interesting is looking at the role of parents here and looking at the role of what it means to, in so many ways, I'm considering and thinking about with all of this. Not sure I have any particularly profound answer about any of it, except for the fact that we have a horrifying culture of gun violence in this country. We have a horrifying culture of school shootings in this country. And we also have a horrifying circumstance of the failure of individuals to take action in critical moments to stop murders, to stop violence when they might occur.
Well, is it, and thank you for that, because I'm so glad that you and your colleague traveled around. What inspired you, before I pivot to Dwight McKee, what inspired you to travel around? What were you looking for?
What we were looking for was some explanation for not only how these things happen, not only the prevalence that happen, but really also about how communities are affected and how communities respond to these horrible incidents happening. And this was something that we cared really deeply about. I continue to care really deeply about because of how much this affects the United States, how this has become such a part, whether we like it or not, this is a part of who we are right now as a country. And we are not wrestling with it in the ways that we need to. We are not confronting it in the ways that we need to. As I mentioned, in 2023, we had almost 350 school shootings. And as a country, we don't really blink an eye. Congress doesn't really blink an eye. State officials don't really blink eyes on this. In fact, they move in the other direction. And this is, something that, really, even as far back as 2007, were dynamics that, we cared really deeply about exploring and trying to understand. And, almost 20 years later now, not only has very little changed, but it has gotten worse and worse.
Dwight McKee, Linear Bob said, I wonder why his parents thought that buying that child a killing machine was an innocent thing to do. And why did they go to a shooting range? It seems to me there's a lot wrong there. I'm saying hello to my sister, Rhoda McKinney Jones, sending you much love, my sweet. What is your assessment of this? I mean, because it's the principal saw that the backpack looked heavy, didn't check it. I mean, there's almost like a presumption of innocence that goes with these children that doesn't go with black and brown children. And okay.
You can't extract the sickness of the culture from the negligence of the parents in this.
Mm-hmm.
These parents could not have taken him at 16 to 15 to a strip club. They couldn't get in, they wouldn't get arrested. They couldn't have taken him to the tavern and have him drink the night away because he was too young to go to the tavern. In this culture, shooting sex for children, sex is a crime. Shooting is a right. There's something decadent about this culture. What we never deal with is the fact that shooting is so much part of the culture because of the genocidal nature of the culture and Europeans who came over and took natives' land and needed guns to protect the theft. And then bought slaves over here, needed guns to maintain slavery. And so inherent in the very fiber of the culture is guns. That is an extension of the plunder and the rape that came with the founding of the country. And because we live in mythology rather than truth, we fail to realize that that's something that can be remedied by a change in the thinking process of the society and change in the gun laws themselves. So they are responsible, yes, because they were negligent parents and she was fascinated and preoccupied with her own decadent life. And the daddy taught him how to shoot. All that is true.
but they was doing it with a backdrop of state legislators that, as already said, gave the whole society, that whole community, license even to have guns and to see going to a shooting range as a rite of passage, like taking a kid to a baseball game or a football game. I mean, it's really very, very sick. And that culture only exists in America. You can't do that in Japan. You can't do that in Germany. In most countries in the world, you don't have the right or the license to take your child on a shooting range excursion like you're going on a picnic. Unless we extract those thoughts, those deeds, those historic actions, that reality from our culture and our laws, we will never be on this cycle unless we make a calculated effort to extract that mindset from the culture that we have the right to bear arms, that quote unquote to protect ourselves, where we end up basically killing each other. So you're really not trying to protect yourself from yourself. You know, and these children, many of them who are emotionally disturbed already because of the bullying part of the culture, already feel assaulted and have, and don't have a lot of ways to cope with their own sense of being abused. You grow up watching Cowboys and Indians, you grow up watching television, you grow up with those video games, and your only approach to conflict resolution is a gun. It's cause and effect.
Are you saying with the bullying, with the emphasis on guns, are we a mean-spirited culture? I mean, what is it, Dwight?
No, this is cause and effect. It's not even spirit, it's your reflex. Is that children bully children. That's what children do. But in most cultures, that's addressed from wrestling, that's addressed from, a relay race where they outrun each other. That's addressed from a little fight. When I was growing up, you had the Friday 13 get down, where you and the kids in the neighborhood go and have a little fight, call it a day. I mean, in most cultures, it's addressed. You have the same relationship between children and the same semblance between teenagers, semblance between people on the road. But the difference in America is that in most cultures it's resolved a different way because they have limited options. In America, on the road, you drive and somebody cut you off, and rather than throw a stick at them, you reach in your glove compartment and get out a gun because the culture gives you the right to do it, and that's how you resolve it. So the same reflex where you would call somebody a name or throw a stick at them, you take a gun out and shoot them at 6 times. It's the availability of the guns that mitigate how you respond and how violent your response becomes.
Does it start?
If you didn't have a gun available and you only had the stick available, you would throw the stick rather than shoot the gun.
So you think it's the guns, not us, or is it a combination of the two?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think it's a culture that came into existence based on the need for guns, based because of how the culture itself, how the country itself was born. So it gives everybody a right to carry a gun. So then when you have natural issues that every group, every culture pretty much has, because you have these guns available, the way you resolve them is different. If you were a child and child from Ethiopia, Somalia, you challenge the guy, the little kid that's among you, to a marathon or a race, and you would beat them and you would humiliate them and you called it a day. But in America, because of the nature of the culture, the way you resolve that is with a gun, and you take it out and you just start shooting anything at hand. It is how you resolve. It's the first step in conflict resolution because you've not been trained for other options. And inherent, in England, nobody even have guns. So they don't have a lot of school shootings because they don't have a lot of guns to shoot. They do have, conflicts. They do have fights. Soccer games, they have fights all the time.
Well, hold that thought. We're going to be back after the break. We're going to bring up Attorney Mark Fancher. CK, if you can, get Attorney Fancher up. And let's continue to talk about this. Is it the guns? Is it us? It's a combination of the two. Back in just a minute. Well, you all keep talking because we're on Facebook and YouTube. Everybody, Joseph Ziegler, how you doing, sweetie? Sending you much love. Ari, sending you much love. And let me say hello to everybody. Of course, I'm going to say it on air as well. But of course, Andre was up first because he wants to be. Oh my gosh. Robert, how you doing? MC Vixen V, how you doing? Newport 348. Michael Ann, hey, my girl. She's one of the founding Morning Stars. Shirley from Philadelphia. Joyce, how you doing? Sweetie, Michael Ann again. Barbara Bacon from Oak Park, holding it down. And Bob Smith, how you doing? And let me see who else. Bernadette, how you doing? Ashley down there in Memphis. Dynamo Dave of Duluth. Terry Sterling. Josette Jenkins Gallant. Let me know where you are too, everybody, when you can. Let me know where you are. Sending you all so much love. Renee Criswell from here in Chicago. And D-Ray, sending you so much love. Laura, Donnie D, Linear Bob, Silicon Valley. Joe Wagner, how you doing? How are you doing? Louis Chewy, George Jackson, sending you so much love. Well,
We have Attorney Fancher on the line as well.
thank you. How you doing, Attorney Fancher?
I'm just fine, thank you. Good morning.
Whew, my goodness. CK, when you see these cases, what do you think? It's like I'm
Well, we have to put it in a cultural setting. When I was doing commentary and receiving comments, not just on Court TV but other places, what struck me was that there were some people that said, it's no big deal that the mother, because by the way, the mother, it's not just the father who took him to the shooting range. His mother did as well. and that's why she was. So I don't want people to be confused. His mother took him to the shooting range, sort of like how, you might go roller skating. Culturally, there are different things that people do. But I received in a very culturally diverse space comments such as, well, it's no big deal that they took to the shooting range. That's not a big deal. That happens a lot. That part is normal. And I said, whoa. That's not normal for everybody. That might be normal within a certain culture, but it's not. I can't imagine at 17 any of my parents taking me to a shooting range to make the way making sure that I knew how to shoot and giving me a gun or buying a gun for me. And so I don't know the backdrop, but that's not something that's common in every culture. But it's something that is perceived as being no big deal because people actually said that to me. But even if that's no big deal, and it's accepted, and I reflect on what Dwight McKee just said, the great visionary social scientist, visionary thinker Dwight McKee, Daddy D, what he said, still we cannot run away from what happened the day of the shooting, where you have in your hands a drawing, anyone, man, woman, child, who has a drawing that depicts a killing with a gun to a child's head and explains why the first one should be this way, needs immediate attention and needs to be removed from that space. And the fact that the parents nor the school did anything to prevent that I think the school was a little culpable as well, but that does not absolve the parents, obviously. But I just think that, but it does happen. I'm sure that principal, in hindsight, he said, well, I wish I had checked the backpack. Because I remember thinking, this is heavier than I thought it would be. And he has the evidence right there. He has that drawing. He has a heavy backpack. 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. 1 + 1 would equal 2 for some other principals in other schools, in inner city schools, for instance, and schools that has cultural diversity. 1 + 1 would equal 2, and they would be held to a standard of 1 + 1 equaling 2. So I think across the board, even if we nullify, which I don't, but neutralize the shooting range experience as being a normal part of life in this country, we may not like it, but that's what it is. The evidence on that day and a lot of the other actions of the parents leading up to that, having nothing to do with the shooting range, having nothing to do with buying a gun, point to a certain amount of gross negligence and neglect. Or the neglect could be just neglecting the child's cries of pain and wanting help. But that drawing on that day is something that no one can get around. And I am a victim. Imagine how those parents feel when they knew there was that drawing. Sometimes people come in, they seem a little bit off, and they just shoot. There aren't all these clues. There's not all this information evidence. That's why this case is novel. That's why this state, Michigan, said enough is enough. Because in this instance, the facts warranted, they believe, bringing in the parents. Usually it doesn't. So I don't want people to start thinking this is going to be a disturbing trend. I don't think it's going to be a disturbing trend unless there is evidence like there is in the Ethan Cromley case, the Jennifer Cromley case, the father's case, that the parents were complicit. They are grown folks. They knew what they were doing and providing and furnishing the ammunition to this child to do exactly what he did. Now, you don't know what your kids are going to do by looking at the other side. You really don't know. Any given day, they could do a lot of things. But you don't have to help expedite the process, give them the tools, take them there. Their science is going to do something, heavy backpack, and leave them in that environment.
But CK, they dismissed the warnings. See, that to me, CK and Ari and Mark and Dwight, they were dismissive of the warnings and laughed about them. And the mother even said, as you recall, CK, you need to get better at hiding your stuff, to paraphrase her. Who does that?
Who does that is the mother who's now in jail. That's who does that.
Oh,
so
gosh.
I think that as it's sad, it is sad. I'm a parent. I'm concerned about the precedential value, but I think the precedential value, the reason this is not going to catch on like wildfire, it only catch on like wildfire if we have parents that are as engaged as these parents were and helping to provide the tools for these murders. And all, so it's very fact specific.
Well, stand by. We're in under a minute before we come back on. And I want to get your thoughts about this. Mark, want to hear back from you, Ari, because you traveled around the country after this happened, in parts of the country. And I'm glad you were in Virginia and got a chance to see the great, iconic Nikki Giovanni, who has such profound insights. But I'm wondering, CK, if this will be a trend. I'm wondering.
Only in certain circumstances.
Okay.
I mean, this was a test case. First time it's happened, first time the conviction in this country. So it could potentially happen, but again, only when the facts warrant it.
Stand by, hold on. No, we're
okay.
10 seconds. Okay. 5, 4, 3. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show on AM950 Radio, Minneapolis-St. Paul. Sending you all so much love. Hey, Gary Hines and Sounds of Blackness and Reverend McAfee and Spike. Sending you all so much love today. I am going to be bringing, of course, my Sounds of Blackness theme song back on, but I'm also going to be bringing a song that I did with Chris Willis some years ago. And I hope you will enjoy that too. Put your arms around the world. And another song, These Are the Innocent. So stay tuned for that. We're talking about the Cromley case. And at the bottom of the hour, we will be talking with Dr. Max Wolf about the spike in credit card defaults. What is that saying? It means y'all ain't got no money. For all the talk about the economy being so great, the fact is it's a law of averages, everybody. It's the mean that they're looking at, which is the average, right? If you have extreme wealth at the top and extreme poverty at the bottom, when you combine the two, it's going to look like everything's all right. It's not all right. People can't pay these bills. Got to talk about that here on the Santita Jackson Show. Call me. Well, no, you can't, but you reach out to me on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel, and let's find out what your thoughts are. Let's get to some of these headlines. The Supreme Court will consider Donald Trump's eligibility to be president. The court will hear arguments about Colorado banning the former president from its primary ballot because of his role in the January 6, 2021 attack on the Capitol. The case, which hinges on a part of the Constitution banning insurrectionists from office, could determine his status as a candidate nationwide. Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu called a ceasefire proposal, oh boy, delusional. He doesn't want peace, you guys. But we do, and we're paying for it, everybody. The group demanded they have a three-part solution, and that includes the withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, something that Prime Minister Netanyahu said that he will not do. So he is vowing to continue fighting with our money. Senate Republicans blocked a $118 billion border bill yesterday. The bill, which paired border security measures with funding for Ukraine and Israel, lost support after former President Trump criticized it. He has made the border a core 2024 campaign issue. 5 Marines are missing, God bless them, after they flew during the California storm. They were on a helicopter flying from Nevada to California on Tuesday. The aircraft was found, but not them. Let's pray for them and pray that they are found safe and sound. Miracles can happen, everybody. Native Americans have the least access to the National Liver Transplant List. This is of significance, everybody, because they have the highest rate of death from liver disease. And with the highest rate of death from liver disease, they are still the least likely to get on the list because they have the least money. You need a doctor's referral. You need resources. They don't have them. Think about that, everybody. And in Minneapolis-St. Paul, you're going to have rain today, light rain, 52 degrees. It is beautiful up there. Can you believe it feels like spring already, everybody? It feels like spring. I don't know, something's odd to me about all of that. And you will have the Timberwolves facing off against the Bucks tonight in Milwaukee. And the Wilds were triumphant over Chicago in hockey yesterday, 2-1. Let's talk about the Crumbly case. Of course, we've got Legal Eagle attorney C.K. Hoffler, who has been covering this case, Ethan's case, and Jennifer Crumbly's case, the son and the mother. And I'm sure she will also be covering James Crumbly, they disengaged each other. That is to say, the mother and father, this married couple, or are they still married? They decided not to have the case together. We're joined by attorney Mark Fancher, Ari Bloomkatz, executive editor of In These Times magazine. I urge you to become a subscriber. They do a lot of great work. And of course, he's covered these shootings. And in at least one instance, he went out to talk to people about it, because this is you can't not talk to people when these things happen every day in the United States. And of course, brilliant social scientist, the dean of the Ma'afa Redemption Project, Rainbow Push, and the National Action Network, Dwight McKee. Let me start with you, Mark. We haven't heard from you yet. And this happened up there in Michigan with you. What do you make of this case? What do you make of the conviction of the mother in this case?
Well, as a purely academic question, the idea of extending criminal liability to the parent is an appealing one, particularly given their outrageous conduct. And in a sense, it is certainly consistent with traditional African culture. I mean, they're not African, and this isn't Africa, but in Africa, individuals were not targeted as they are in Western societies for criminal punishment. When a person commits a criminal act or committed a criminal act in traditional Africa, it wasn't just that individual, but their entire village assumed responsibility.
outraged about what these parents did. And I understand the sense that people have of justice extending to these parents. But what I also know is that I understand U.S. realities and realities of the criminal punishment system. And the fact that it's not equal, it's not fair, it's not just. And so I resist, as a general matter, the extension of the reach of the criminal justice system as much as I can. I don't want to extend its opportunity to try and criminalize more people for pretty much anything, because the opportunities and the leeway that prosecutors now have to criminalize people are quite ample. And in this case, we're dealing with a mass school shooting. And what's been happening in this country is that with each of these, people have become increasingly outraged and increasingly upset about the reactions to these. And they've done all kinds of things to try and presumably deter these things from happening. And the odd phenomenon, really not so odd if you understand America, is that the enforcement of these rules or laws, these policies that they come up, has not targeted the demographic that's most responsible for school shootings. Now, there certainly are exceptions, but for the most part, the idea of taking a gun into a school and shooting it up is a young white boy thing. It really is. But when you look at the measures that have been taken historically to try and address this problem, even though it's a young white boy thing, the ones who end up getting targeted, the ones who end up the focus of these measures that are put on the book in order to deal with this are usually urban, and they're usually Black and Latino.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of metal detectors was something that came up. Maybe we can stop mass shootings by having metal detectors in schools. You find metal detectors in every urban school.
Yes.
You do not find them. You do not find them in the white suburban schools where these school shootings most often happen. School resource officers is an idea that came up as a result of this. They thought, well, if we have law enforcement officers in the school, then we'll have people on the ground ready. But you find them, but the quality and the nature of the work of SROs, school resource officers, in urban schools versus those in suburban schools, when they're there, are very different. The SROs in urban schools are cops. I mean, they're real cops. Square-jawed, I'm going to knock you up against the side of the wall cops. The ones in suburban schools are just a step away from being kindly school counselors. Hallway sweeps, where police just go through the hallways looking for anybody who shouldn't be there and doing. Those are things that are an urban school phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
So when we start talking about making parents responsible for the acts of their children, we have to be very careful because while this is intended, or at least it's what's contemplated right now, are suburban white parents like Crumbly. Ultimately, just give it a little time. The only time that we'll see this happening is when Jamal, in Chicago or Detroit or Minneapolis or in LA, when Jamal is acting irresponsibly, single mom who's just out of her teens herself, is barely able to keep him in line, and he somehow manages to get a gun and he falls in with a gang, and then mom is asked, didn't you know that your son was running with the Crips? Didn't you know that he was doing this? Or didn't you know? And she, I was trying to do everything I could, and then all of a sudden mom is facing charges for involuntary manslaughter. Meanwhile, suburban moms are running around doing the same thing that Ms. Crumbly was doing. And then we have yet another incident of a white school being shot up. So I'm just saying that we have to be very careful and not base our assessment of what happens in this country on the facts that are before us, because we know the turn that they always take, particularly when we're dealing with the criminal system.
Well, I've thought about that too, how this could bleed into Black and brown homes, because you do see the the metal detectors in black and brown schools. You don't see them in Columbine. They're not there. They're not at New Trier. They're not at, in Bloomfield Hills. They're not there, Dwight. So I mean, what's the solution? Or where do you see this going?
Well, fact of the matter is, what you also end up not dealing with is the other 349 shootings in the schools and those parents. So you expect one family that is extreme from the process, and you say, okay, this will help mitigate these shootings because you got the parents now responsible. But as Harry said, they have 350 shootings a year in these schools. What do you do with the other parents? Do you also hold them responsible? Do you put them on trial? What's the measure of their involvement? It goes from you took them to the shooting range, and so you're responsible you never took them to church, and now you're also responsible. I mean, that myth is so subjective as to what does irresponsibility look like, that it lends itself to, like Mark said, you kind of pick and choose, and it becomes, at one level, a byproduct of your social status or your racial status, as whether or not you get pinned or not pinned, that has been socially responsible. And that's why I keep going back to the culture. And I don't want you all to sleep when I say that these parents could not have gone taking these kids to a strip club. There is something decadent about a society where taking children to a strip club is seen as morally deficient and perversive, but taking them to a driving range at the same age is seen as a constitutional right.
Well, and a rite of passage, Dwight. Hold that thought. Ari Bloomcats, because that's deep. I mean, Dwight is making the point that, as I'm sure, did you observe this as being deep in the American culture, deep in the American fabric?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think as, Dwight mentions, this is the core of a country that was built on violence and blood, and exploitation. One of the things that I'm thinking about a little bit here too, DJ talks a lot about, taking folks to the range and culpability of the parents involved in that. And one of the things I'm thinking about is that even if you also buy the argument about taking folks, that it's okay to take folks to, ranges here and young folks to ranges here, that this is also so ridiculous on so many levels too. When I was growing up, I'm not a big fan of guns, but when I was growing up, my grandfather used to take me hunting through pheasant a lot. He used to take me, out shooting for, pellets and all of this sort of stuff. But when we were on our way to hunt, when we were on our way to do any of this, we would sing songs about gun safety. We would sing songs about, never, using guns in particular ways. And those guns were locked in safes that no matter how hard I could ever try, I would never be able to get to whatsoever. I would never be able to, find them or get to them in any way as well. So even if we buy, some of these arguments that it's, okay about, taking this young man to a shooting range or anything like that, there's further culpability here about how these guns are still available, and what's given, just handed over to this young person as well. And that's really important on, so many levels and so irresponsible. on so many levels as well. But, you know, this is what, you know, you mentioned, you know, Nick Giovanni, when you talked about, you know, Howard Zinn and other folks, you know, over and over again, they would describe, you know, story after story, instance after instance, historical marker after historical marker, and how our country has been built on blood and built on gun violence. And this is something also that, you know, Roxanne Ortiz talks about in, you know, her landmark book about, you know, guns and the right to bear arms and all of this. And we also, you know, I forget who mentioned it on the call here, but, you know, whiteness and white supremacy and toxic masculinity and patriarchy does play an extreme role in all of this. You know, the overwhelming majority of not only, you know, school shooters, but mass shooters throughout the country have all been white men. And there is, in my opinion, a direct connection between the white supremacy that engaged, you know, in gun violence and the blood that, you know, built this country in so many ways, and the white supremacy that we're seeing right now, as well, and that continues to this day in the culture of white supremacy and toxic masculinity that is brought into all of this as well. And I don't think it's hyperbolic or unreasonable to draw those parallels. And on our, you know, trip around the country, I'm talking to folks about this. Those were the parallels that literally almost everyone we talked to, again and again and again, you know, true, with the exception of the folks who were building, you know, their own arsenals or who were engaging in gun fantasy and things like that. So, you know, I think those connections are pretty strong.
CK, I can't help but think that as the parents were being warned, at some point this stuff was legal. Like they had the right not to, or talk to me. I mean, how is it that the principal didn't search the bag? I mean, there was nothing that compelled him to do that?
Well, I think, you know, there are a few things that happened that were legally permissible. One, the father, an adult, went and purchased a gun legally. That was done legally. There was no fake ID. There was no underage child trying to do it. It was the father. And the father took his son. That's a little bit odd, but his son could have just been, that's probably not unusual. You know, if you go into, you can buy some of these guns at some places in Walmart. So, you know, people take their loved ones. But what was legal was how the father purchased the gun. What happened at the school, did the principal have probable cause, you know, because they look at things like that. They have guidelines too. Well, when you have, I would say he should have, because he noted that there was a backpack that was heavy. He noted that. He said, I remember thinking to myself, this backpack heavy. But which is most significant was this drawing. And he's there with the parents with this drawing to discuss the disturbing drawing and their son's behavior. If ever there were a time in life, in the history of the world, where you could have taken the liberty to search a backpack and not have harm, it would have been then. You could have handed the backpack to the parents and said, I want you to. There's so many things that principal could have done that he didn't do. So that is where I think the school failed. It would have stopped Ethan Crumbley from doing it that day. Now, would he have done it down the line? I don't know. But that day, which is how we have to assess these cases, it certainly would have made a difference that day. That drawing was enough, Santita. The drawing was simply enough.
Absolutely. But, you know, Mark, you bring us back to a point of which we need to beware. The blowback. Because, you know, these laws start off this way, ostensibly, but the people...
I agree with Mark.
I do too.
I agree with Mark, and I think that I agree with what he said on that point too. I think that this is, but I do think in this case, and it's a case-by-case basis, and it starts on a case-by-case basis. I mean, I analyze cases as well and look at them, and it does start in a case like this that smacks you in your face. Where you're like, well, of course, the parents are liable. But I want to present a scenario. What about if you are in a situation in a home where people are living in an urban area where it's very, very dangerous? There are guns in the house for them to protect themselves from home invasions and everything because they're in a dangerous environment, dangerous community. And it's just that. And a mother is working 3 jobs. This is not uncommon. A single parent raising her children, and something similar happens. And then they delve deeper into the home, and they discover, well, there's a gun there that was purchased on the street, not properly purchased or not purchased within the legal structures, and that there have always been guns there to protect this family. You could see a scenario developing where the mother working 3 jobs, not there, nobody's there to raise the kids, to do this, to do that, a similar analysis. So we have to keep our eye on that, because that is the way that the criminal justice system has evolved to ultimately hurt Black and brown people. We know that. But in this particular case, and that's why we need to overhaul the criminal justice reform. Now we get to the politics of it. But in this particular case, and I say this as a parent, and I am fearful. I mean, you do feel some kind of way when you're a parent. Of course, my kids are of majority age, but it doesn't matter. It can happen to anybody. When I say happen to anybody, where your kids do something that you can't believe or that was unforeseen. I do not think for a minute that these parents thought, because they weren't thinking, that their son would go and shoot up the school. I'm not sure what they were thinking about getting him a gun and taking him to the shooting range, but in some families and some cultures, that is normal. I think that where they really failed everyone, the victims, the school, and their child, is that they did not do anything and pick up on the signs that this child was begging for help and needed help.
Sure.
And maybe they did what they thought in their culture, what they thought was going to.
Yeah, but you know what? CK, at some point, we've got to look at that culture and find out what's up with that. I mean, you know what? Everyone takes apart Black culture and tells me they pathologize it. They tell me all that's wrong with it. But no one takes apart this other culture where you have all of this killing. Stay right there, CK. I've got to bring up Dr. Max Wolf in a minute, but I want you to speak to that, Mark Fancher. No one talks about that. It's something.
We're talking about it.
No. I'm saying more broadly. That was not part of the. We're talking about it because this is this show and this is progressive radio and da. But the culture overall just doesn't mention it. They don't mention it. I mean, Mark.
Yeah, the late reggae singer Peter Tosh, had a song called "You Can't Blame the Youth," and it's a brilliant song. I mean, it talks about all of the delinquency, all of the different types of problems that young people are, frequently criticized for engaging in. But then what he does is he places it within context, and he says, well, he explains methodically why would you expect anything different from this child, given that what you did, every Christmas you gave him a pretty toy gun. You celebrated these pirates as heroes. You did this, you did that. And so I think that's right. I mean, this child did not emerge in isolation. It's not just his parents. It's not just his school. It's not just his city. We're dealing with a country that really honestly has experienced spiritual death. And it accounts in large measure for why these things keep happening. There's a huge vacuum in the lives of young people. And nobody is prepared to deal with it or address it honestly. And it was hastened along down the road to spiritual death by the things that many of the proponents of guns frequently rely on as their rallying call, and that's the Second Amendment. I mean, the Second Amendment is not just some little provision in the Constitution that says that people can just bear arms. It was put in there for the specific purpose of giving people the opportunity to kill indigenous people who were trying to protect their land from being stolen, trying to defend themselves against genocide. It was placed in there specifically for the purpose of having white settlers and hunger and suffer in a foreign land. So all of this is grounded. The foundations of it are wicked, are evil, and the culture which has emerged on top of that foundation is one that is likewise wicked and evil. Because the fact is, while people might wag their fingers at those who are trying to kill indigenous people and those who are trying to put down enraged enslaved Africans, the fact is that many of the people who arm themselves now and who are at the very heart of the gun culture in this country are people who still, whether they say it out loud or not, are arming themselves so that they can kill people of color. Because in their view, this was and should remain a white country, and there are too many people of color who are trying to take it over, and it's necessary for them to make America great again by making America white again, and they'll do anything, they'll elect anybody who's on board with that program. Guns, 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 that's what you live by, that's what you preserve the society by. And so when a child enters into that type of an environment with that type of thinking and grows up in it, what do we expect?
Before I bring on Dr. Max Wolf, why don't you respond to that, Dwight? Because we have this migrant crisis in which we're saying these little brown people don't belong here, without understanding that they refer to Texas and New Mexico and Arizona as El Norte. They're Americans too.
No, we are Mexicans too.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, excuse me. Say that one more time. I think CK, I'm gonna have to put him off the phone. CK. Ari, and see, that's the awful part. And the awful part is that Ari sitting up there in silence agreeing. That is frightening. Go on.
And the cosign on Mark's point, the only place you find these kind of laws in places now like South Africa and where they took the land from the natives, in places like Australia. They took the land from the natives. Places like Gaza, where the settlers are now armed to the teeth and have the right to shoot any intruders, any invaders, because they are taking other people's land. That it really, the guns come with the culture, and the culture is more generally taking other people's stuff. I think that, again, the danger is because nobody really dissects this from white supremacy or from colonialism or from manifest destiny. And it being a byproduct of a mindset that you have a right to take somebody's stuff and then defend your right to have it.
I'm sorry, Dwight. That sounds so crazy, but that's really what it is. I mean, it sounds crazy.
But that's what it is.
Yeah.
It comes with the right to take people's stuff, and then to defend yourself if they protest you taking their stuff. That's where these gun laws come from. And the reason that it's disproportionate to some moral imperative is the example I gave, is that's why it would be immoral in the culture's mind to be able to take these kids to get 15 to a sex club. And all the legislators in the area would make sure that they pass legislation reinforcing that you cannot take a 13-year-old to strip club. And yet these same legislators, when you talk about these kids having the right to bear arms, say, well, it's a First Amendment right. They have that right to do that. I remember growing up that when Big Van Dyke and Mary
Tyler Moore.
Van Dyke,
Oh,
Tyler Moore.
and hold on one second. CK, hold on one second. CK, I just sent you a text. Would you please do that for me? But go on, continue, Dwight.
They were married. They couldn't sleep in the same bed on television as a married couple. And yet their son was running around in the backyard with a 6-year-old playing cowboys in India.
Hmm.
There's a schizophrenia in the culture about morality and immorality, and it's directly tied into the way this country was founded. Directly tied into the way this country was founded. Anytime, because when you think about it, had they said that this young man had a sex issue, that he was looking at pornography, the principal would immediately look in his bag to try to find a Playboy article or something. Immediately.
Mm-hmm.
The schizophrenia is not just in the parent and in the child, it's in the culture.
Well, you know what? Let me pivot, if you will, because that this is a conversation C.K. Hoffler and Ari Bloomcats and Mark Fancher that we have to continue to have. But let me tell you something. We have to look at this money too. These credit card defaults are on the rise, and as people become more financially insecure, you see the whole society acting out, Dwight and Mark and Ari and CK. What do they say? When the money gets funny, so does the honey. People lose their minds. Black folks not as much. We're accustomed to dealing with less, and we have another kind of emphasis. But so much of this social upheaval is being driven by people being broke, trying to make it from payday to Monday, and they can't. Dr. Max Wolf, and now credit card defaults are up. I'm not surprised.
No, but thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to be here. I do think that while we've seen this pattern of rise and fall in credit card delinquencies, just for everyone out there, that just means you're more than 30 days late on that bill. And then defaults come, 90 plus days if you can't work things out. So delinquencies, if not resolved, become the defaults. And we see them both up. And while that's not unusual, there is a cycle of rising and falling. It's also true that the rates were pretty low for a while. Looks like that was largely driven by the government help, which of course has kind of dried up for almost everybody and is less for everybody. And a 54% year-over-year increase, which we just saw, is not normal, right? So it's not standard. So we saw about 4% become over about 6% pretty fast. And those numbers may not seem like a lot at home, but if 1.5 times as many people are having trouble paying their full minimum bill, right? We're not talking about knocking down balances, paying more than the minimum. We're talking about people having trouble paying even that sort of minimum water treading level of the credit card payment each month. And folks are starting to have that problem, not just 1 month, when there's some sort of disruption in income for a month, but for 2 and 3 months. Then you're starting to see kind of a pattern. You're also seeing kind of an elevated level among middle and upper middle class households, and particularly younger households. So folks sort of under 40, which in the parlance of statisticians who do this are younger households. I know who's younger and who's older. People have their own definitions of these things. So the one that we tend to use just to have a statistical norm is about 40. And what this means is folks can't or don't, almost always can't, make that minimum payment on their credit card for 30 plus days. That starts the process. And then if they kind of still can't get there after 60 and 90 days, you start to move into a more problematic situation here where people are in default as opposed to delinquent. And just to see the numbers kind of pop up that much seems kind of impressive. And if we further dig through it, we also see that what seems to have happened is people are paying as much as they always paid, but things cost more. So it looks more like a case where the people can't afford to pay the new higher prices for what they're buying with their credit card, more than that they're paying less. We can kind of figure out what's going on. And then I know folks are going by their own metrics, and I would say one quick defense of the national statistics is people tend to know a small amount of the world, right? Because we're very segregated by our income and our education level and geography and gender and education levels and races in this country. And so you may know a lot of people in your orbit, but the national average tells us how 180 million households are doing. And unless you're socializing is very deep and very broad, it's pretty unlikely that you're going to get a kind of representative slice of all the different places and types of folks out there with credit cards.
Yeah, but what's the difference between what did you said default and I mean
So
just
delinquency,
and
right?
delinquency, just
I
being
always use
distressed.
I always use this example because it usually is easy on the mind of students if you're talking about a classroom. Delinquency is you're late, maybe late pretty often. Default is you drop down. Right? So there's kind of a big difference between late and not doing it. Right? And the way that works in contracts, right? Because credit card is a contract. The way it works on a contract is you're delinquent when you're past the due date, usually by as little as 2 weeks, certainly after 30 days. And then there are some variations, but by 90 days, you're defaulted. So in other words, it's not that you're late to making the payment, it's that legally you have failed to make the payment. So now you're working out how to deal with the default. The other way to think about it is you face a lot of penalties and fees if you're delinquent, but you keep your credit card. What makes situations very perilous sometimes for households that are living on edge and are using their credit cards to substitute for the non-existent social services and or because they don't have savings is when you're in default, your credit card is not gonna work. If you take it out and attempt to make another purchase, that may work. There's some variation there. That may work when you're delinquent. Could reasonably might work. But when you take that same credit card out and attempt to use it to make a purchase, or if someone tries to run it on a repeating thing like a cell phone contract or a car insurance contract, it's not going to work when you're in default. Again, if you don't have any savings, that could mean that your car insurance goes off, which is actually a criminal offense. It could mean that you can't pay a co-pay premium for medical care. It could, whatever you're buying, groceries, pharmaceuticals, it can have a pretty devastating impact on people because it can sort of cut off their ability to continue to make the purchases that sustain them or families or parents or children or whoever they're buying for.
Well, I'm trying to figure out how it is we're watching. When I talk to people, they're struggling. And yet I continue, but then I see this report about credit card defaults going up. Not just delinquencies, but defaults. I can't pay it. I can't do it. I can't do it. I do it. And yet I'm hearing the economy's doing well. Who is it doing well for?
Right. Well, it's also the economy is a lot of moving pieces. And so the economy is probably still doing okay in an aggregate. So overall, the total dollar value of wealth produced is going up. Partly that's because the inflation can make those numbers look good. Partly that's because you're forcing people off of the stingy and expiring government services back into the labor markets in some cases. But it also might be, which there's a lot of evidence for, that profits are doing really well. So when the profit share of the national economy rises, which it has, then the amount of money going to the owners of companies is going up. That's not usually a credit card delinquency crowd, but it's pretty improbable. And so if the wage amount in the society goes down and the capital amount in society goes up, as it largely has gotten to unsustainable highs, probably in the profit department against the wage department, the economy can do well. And that doesn't necessarily filter through to wage earners so much. Obviously, wage earners is 150 million people, so there's a lot of variety in there. But the average wage earner might not do very well. And the other thing is that people are what we call sticky down, which is if they can't afford a middle class lifestyle, which is definition for them of pleasure and success and supporting their family, they won't ratchet down their purchases as fast as their income falls. So in other words, if inflation robs you of some of your income, you may or may not be willing to eat meat less times a week with your family. You may or may not cancel all your streaming services and stop watching so much Netflix, or not buy the new glasses, or go with the old phone with the cracking screen for a lot longer, right? Those real decisions are pretty painful, probably especially in a country where people are not getting the low-cost happiness that other people get from rich personal relationships and rich spiritual life and a sense of community engagement. Those are great ways to feel better with less money. We don't do that very well here. And then the other thing is public goods. I say it all the time on the show. I'm sure everyone's annoyed, but when you're less rich, and we are less rich, and we will be less rich in terms of stuff, public goods are very valuable. The public swimming pool, the beautiful park that most of the rest of the advanced world has, the public healthcare system, the public transit system. It's an equalizer, and it means we have a better quality of life with a little less money. That does reduce the chances that you default, that you go super far into debt. Last thing I'll tell you, because I think it's interesting and no one talks about it, is these younger folks who are really feeling the pinch here. Those are the people caught up in this thing about student loan debt too.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of lower income people have student loan debt. There's a misnomer that student loan debt is a problem of rich people. It is absolutely not. There's also a sense that student loan debt is for middle class white people. Actually hits hardest in African American households trying to get an education for a host of reasons, right? African American and new arrival Hispanic families have been really hard hit by this. And for whatever reason, as folks think about the elections too, the Republican Party has decided as a matter of righteousness to deny student loan debt forgiveness. And I think that's causing people to be nervous and to pay money towards student loans, which is happening around the same time. It's not the only thing, it may not even be the biggest thing, but it is a contributor to the particular stresses of low-income households, just because lower income younger households tend to pay a really surprisingly and disturbingly significant part of their income to pay back the cost of education, which can be incurred in the traditional like 18 to 25, but are also incurred by people, this is what people tend to forget, who go back for professional training or community college because they're unemployed and they're doing exactly what this society tells them to do to better their circumstances. And they spend a bunch of money on these job trainings. They often don't get a job or don't get one right away, but they have to pay back. And that leaves them in a situation where they didn't have a lot of income or savings. They drew it down to do exactly what we tell them to do, to go get that training, to go get that degree, to better their circumstance. And then they can't pay for it, and then they really start to have delinquencies. It is a pattern. It's real. It's not a rich suburban white person thing like it's sometimes made out to be.
Well, and and people are very angry. I want to very briefly ask whoever is left on the panel, what do they think the social fallout is? I only have a few more minutes, and I want to give a couple of minutes to Dr. Wolf to let us wrap this up. Ari, in a couple of minutes, really under a couple of minutes, what is the social fallout of just having your money dry up? You can't even use your credit cards now.
Well, I think the social fallout is, really profound and deep. I mean, it basically, hinders almost everything you can do. But one of the real consequences I think about a lot of this is, people who are dealing with disabilities, people who are dealing with health crises, and also, people that are dealing with already huge amounts of debt. One of the things that in these times is, embarking on right now is a partnership with the Debt Collective over a special issue that will be coming out in June. And, in this issue, we're exploring the consequences of all sorts of debt, which is a absolutely, unifying experience for so much of, those of us in the United States who are struggling with this. And one of the things that, Debt Collective talks a lot about is whether or not there are sort of cracks, whether or not there are possibilities for organizing folks around debt and using, debt as leverage to enact change on, a number of levels across the country. And, they think of themselves as the first debtors union and as an actual debtors union and modeled off of, many different other types of unions as well. And I think that's a really, radical and interesting idea about whether or not there can be some unified movement in this area and really, drastic change in this area. But, that is just so deeply, not only like traumatizing, but just deeply hindering on so many different levels. And I just like really struggle, folks and people wind up, in cycles and cycles of this that are really hard to get out of.
Dwight McKee, in under a minute, the impact of just not having this money.
Well, the reality of the individuals tend to get lost in the conditions of the masses. And because the mass economy is doing relatively well, particularly with, all these war economy going on at such a high rate, the struggles of the individual kind of get lost at. You put me in a relay race with Rowan Bolt, you can miscalculate how fast I run because because we got a good. But are you saying it, Liz? No, he and I are on a relay team together. You know what I'm saying? We team together, and we have a world class score. You would think I was playing much faster than I did.
Oh, man.
It's so.
That's exactly it.
Overall, the economy can keep doing great. While I individually are really, really struggling. I think that's what's happening. And I think that's what the Biden team misread, which is why he don't understand how come he can't get credit for what he calls a booming economy. Because it really is booming at the top, but for the people that's not in the top, in the bottom, and in the middle, they are really, really struggling, and they feel the struggles. And that's why they're looking over in Trump's camp now, because he don't understand. Hey, look at the inflation rate, or look at the amount of jobs that young blacks have right now. I said 5%. Well, yeah, but most of those jobs are, at Amazon or at McDonald's or Wendy's, and they are 30, 40, 50-year-old people. So they're not feeling that as a bonanza so much as people who have stock in Amazon.
Well,
They're sweeping a lot of money.
What did Reverend Jackson say? In slavery, everybody had a job. So full employment. Full employment. Well, it does have its drawbacks. You know what? I only have a couple minutes left, and I want to give them, begging your pardon, CK, and begging your pardon, Mark Fancher. I want to give the balance of these minutes to Dr. Wolf. Where do we go from here in this election year?
So I do think there's two things, right? I do think that part of how we got into the debt situation was having as much debt as we do and having it rise as much as it has to get a house, to go to the doctor. Still, the major reason Americans go bankrupt is because of medical expenses, right? So you may be led to believe that it's their extravagant consumer goods purchases, and no doubt that happens sometimes. But it is mostly the big three that cause this. And so this is the point I always make. Number one, medical costs, right? So hardly extravagant, like, oh, look, liver surgery, what a delight, right? So I don't think it's extravagant generally, even though it's sometimes painted that way. Number two is prolonged period of unemployment. You lose your job, and either you get another job that pays quite a bit less, or it takes you a long time to get another job, which might also pay less. And then number three is divorce, which particularly tends to devastate the female household. So again, none of this is really much about frivolous consumer goods. It's really about social safety net failures, right? So the medical travesty of not having national health insurance, one, right? The issue with unemployment insurance in the job market, two, and then the issue of how we adjudicate property and the problems with people getting what their own in a divorce, right? And also wage discrimination against women who tend in a divorce to end up with more child care costs and face income discrimination in terms of their pay gap, right? So what we do is we look to debt to solve the social problems we won't solve. National health care, employment insurance, job retraining, public transit, etc. Okay? And when you look to debt, you turn one person's suffering into another person's revenue opportunity. And you build big businesses. That always ends badly because if you need the money, if you're poor and you borrow money, it's great if you can pull yourself up and out.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't have the social mobility, and that may be for a lot of reasons, sexism, racism, being in the wrong town, the wrong part of town, things that might be, we could agree, kind of beyond the personal choice range.
I got 10 seconds.
Then the debt that helped you yesterday holds you down tomorrow. And so not facing the social issues, using debt to do social fixes leads to deeper social wounds, I think.
And that's the final word. That's the final word. It's got to be. Love you, everybody. See you tomorrow on AM 950 Radio. But no, continue because we switched over to YouTube. Go on.
And I just think that these things are related, not to make everything look at one. And I also think the other thing that has got lower income Americans really hurt is they don't want to identify as lower income Americans. They don't want to identify as in need because that's such a pejorative, such a negative association for so many Americans. And so they don't vote it. For instance, being upset that you're not doing better under Biden and voting for someone who's promising to make you worse for the 43rd time in the last 50 elections, right? Because push for what you want with whoever you elect. But if you elect people who have an overt plan of taking away your medical care and reducing your wages and not giving you student loan forgiveness, you'll just start a fight even worse off. So I think there's also the issue of parsing the anger, right? And here I always make the same point, and it's always unpopular, but I'll just do it again because clearly I have a flat learning curve. I don't think it's about the people. I think it's about the way the society is organized.
Mm-hmm.
So some people are more likable and some people are less likable. True and fact, no doubt. Some people kind of rub you the wrong way, and some people kind of rub you the right way. But we don't really know our politicians and what they're like because it's all spin anyway in terms of what these people are like. I think people should make their decisions, not on who they love, not on who they hate, not on who they want to have a beer with, not on who they feel betrayed by past errors with, but who will best advance their interests. And Exhibit A, why I think that works is the wealthy in America have been very disciplined. Right, left, center, pervert, or saint. The person who carries their water gets their support. And it seems to have worked pretty well for them.
Well, I tell you what, of course, politics shouldn't be, you shouldn't elect someone or vote for someone on personality, but the system is rotten. Dr. King talked about that, and so many others have talked about it. Democrats and Republicans have given Americans a raw deal. And we have to deal with that. And you have to call them both out. You have to call everybody out. The society itself was never structured to give the average person the right deal. It was structured for the oligarchs. The monarchs and the oligarchs got into a fight, and the oligarchs kind of sort of won. But the people still didn't win. The people need to win. I'm not supposed to go broke because I need a liver transplant. Indigenous people, I told you at the top of the show, are the most likely, they suffer from the most liver disease. They need liver transplants the most, but because they don't have resources and because they don't have doctors' connections, because they don't have political connections, they are the least likely to receive a liver transplant. Something is off here, y'all. Period.
Also the poorest Americans.
By every measure, they have the worst metrics. So my thing is, I'm not shilling for any party. I am riding for y'all. Okay. So I want the system to work for everybody. Period. That's it. That's all. Does anyone else want to make some closing thoughts before? Because I need to bounce out of here. Mark Fancher, are you still there? Okay, C.K. Hoffman, well, you're still there. You want to say something?
I'm still there. Yes. So, closing remarks, we have to focus on, though. economy. And when we focus on the economy, no matter what we see in the media, it's going to be based on what's happening in our household. So I think that this election will be very, very interesting because I think, as Rodney King made the point, some people are moving away from Biden, but they're trying not to move towards Trump. So I don't know where they're going to go. But I do think that this election is going to be critical in terms of it will reflect where we are in this country, and unfortunately, I do not think it's going to be really hard.
Ari, do you have anything you'd like to add before we go?
The only thing that I'd like to add is to see if I can, perhaps thread the two conversations in a way about our earlier discussion of gun violence and accountability, as well as our discussion right now sort of about winners and losers in the economy and overall debt. And I was inspired by, we did go on our panel this morning, invoked a Peter Tosh song, and I thought about another song that was actually from The Roots, which begins a bit about media, which is Monday they predict the storm, Tuesday they predict the bang, Wednesday they cover the crash, and I can see it's all about cash. And that, makes me think a lot about the cycle of gun violence that we've seen earlier, who is profiting off of all of this at the end of the day. And when I think about that, that connects me a bit to this second conversation that we're having about who the winners are here in these conversations about debt. And we are talking about a very small class of people right now that are the winners in all of this. And I think that, in many ways, also needs to be our focus as we move forward, which is who are the folks that are actually counting cash off of all of this? Who are the folks that are profiting off of all of this? And I do think that there are deep connections between the two conversations we've been having today.
Dwight McKee, you have a closing thought?
I was going to say you also can't separate this vice of student debt from these students being inundated with credit cards on their 18th birthday. Is that what happens is that you go away to school, you open up your mail, and all of a sudden you got MasterCard and all of these credit card companies inundate you with these credit cards and say, you can have a gold card even if you don't have a job. And so you take the card and one card becomes, a restaurant, the next card becomes your books, the next card becomes your card number. And you look up.
Oh, man.
And and credit card debt, not just from the loan you've taken off for your school bill, but for all the bills that you have that you're able to accumulate while you're in school.
Groceries.
Yeah, and so it almost becomes a conspiratorial to put you in there. And so my charge to students who are going away to school is be very, very worried and very, very careful when you open that envelope. Is what looks like a friend today will be a big enemy tomorrow.
You want to close this out, Dr. Wolf?
Yeah, I also think it's probably appropriate to think about why we try to solve poverty with debt. Because it's pretty well known not to work very well, right? So in other words, if you are unable, given your social position, your time, your industry, your geography, who you are, what you look like, whatever factor, to make a living, then the chances you'll be able to make more than a living to pay back that debt with interest isn't that great. And then the last thing to think about is we talk about upward wealth redistribution, we talk about debt, we forget that debt is a conveyor of upward wealth redistribution. If you do it the way we do it in the US, which is you cut the taxes of the rich, they have more cash, they lend it to the government, and then they pay it, the government pays it back to them with interest. That interest slowly eats the social budget, giving the public more, and they borrow money, then they pay that back with interest. And so you start to get a conveyor belt that just upwardly redistributes wealth. So the shocking upward redistribution of wealth is in fact as shocking as putting all the ingredients for a cake
in a pan, putting it in the oven, and be like, look at this, a cake. And you're absolutely shocked every time. And while it's fine to be thankful for your dessert or your dinner, it's hard as a scientist of social interaction to be surprised every single time.
Only Dr. Wolf. You all, I've so enjoyed you. You know, we're going to work on these. We are going to, William, you said you're a liver transplant patient and you're having problems with your medication. Your doctor and copays are extremely high. And he has no transportation to his appointment. Where are you living, William? Have you reached out to your representative, to your congressperson? Can you let me know where you're living now? If you can fill that out, just let me know where you are. Somebody ought to be able to help you. There ought to be some program. William, please let me know where you are. Because if I can point you in the right direction, I surely will do that. Because, you know, I mean, that's just ridiculous that in this country, when you have a few people who have everything, most people have nothing, and you have William, you're in DeKalb, Illinois. Do you know who your congressperson is, William? Can you just reach out to me right now? Just let me know. Or if you want to send me your email address, let me try and be helpful to you, okay? Don't put your number on here because everybody will have it, unless you want everyone to have it. But if you want to send me your email, I will try my best to try and find someone to help you, okay? So let me know, because I can certainly ask, because there got to be some resources that can help you. Somebody. You just moved it. Well, what's your email? You just recently moved there. Let me know. Let me know. Do you have any? If you feel comfortable doing that, because if I can point you to someone, if I can get you to someone whom you can talk to, who can be helpful to you, I will do that. So if you send me your email, and then I can contact you that way, so that I don't so that everyone does not have, or you may not have email, so that everybody does not have your number. Let me know if you have email, William. Let me know. Because if I can be helpful to you, I want to do that. You're in DeKalb, Illinois. DeKalb, Illinois. DeKalb. Let me look that up myself. DeKalb. Let me see. DeKalb, who is? Because I'll call my brother's office and ask him if anybody can help you. DeKalb. DeKalb. Okay, just one moment, William. Okay, let me say Congressman. Say U.S. Rep. Bill Foster? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Well, there's several. Congressman Bill Foster. You should call his office, but can you send me an email so I can connect you to somebody so you can get some help? But if you would send that to me, William, then maybe I can help you, okay? Can you send me that email? Can you put that email up there right now? And I will reach out and see if there's anything I can do. I certainly will try, because you should be able to get transportation to your liver appointment, and you ought to be able to get an appointment to deal with your liver. And it's not just your U.S. representative, but your county representative, because we have a Cook County commissioner here, Bill Lowry, who has done magnificent work helping people with their health. So if you would give me your email, that would be helpful, okay? So I can be in touch with you, so I can connect you to somebody who can be helpful to you. So if you would just do that, that would be great. If you don't mind, if you don't mind. But if absent that, you should reach out to your congressional representative or your county representative. They ought to be able to give you they ought to be able to give you assistance. You ought to be able to get a ride to your liver appointment. You ought to be able to have someone advocate for you in the healthcare system. So, William, before I go, just please let me know where you are. If I can be helpful to you, I will do that. State Senator, thank you, AW. These are the people you need to be calling like right now. Let me know, William, because I'm going to have to get off in a hot second. But Max and Dwight and CK and Ari, I want to thank you all so much for all of your love and your support. I'm having the feeling we might have to pre-record the show and go on Zoom, which would be great because everybody can see you. I'm going to call the station because people are still not able to hear the show the way that they need to. And if they can take the audio from YouTube, I think that would help them a lot. So at least at this time in the interim, as I'm setting up this home studio. So thank you, Crystal. So William, if you can let me know where you are, that would be helpful. Well, that would be very, very helpful. I know you just moved to DeKalb, but your state representative, your state senator, your state rep, your county representative, your congressperson. Okay, you just sent me your email. Great. All right, let me do this.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Okay.
Appreciate your time and insights.
No, thank you. I'm sorry, Max. I was just trying to help this listener, and if I can help him, I'm going to do it. Okay. All right. Sending you all so much love today, William. I will reach out. And you said Representative Underwood. She is an excellent representative. Could be very, very helpful. So I'm going to find out for you. Okay. All right, sweetie. Thank you so much. I will reach out to. Let me reach out. I'll reach out to a couple of commissioners here, and I will also reach out to my brother's office and see if I can help get you to a representative. Okay. All right, because there's no need for you to suffer. I'm so glad that you said something. Because if you say nothing, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. How about that? So sending you much love, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Dwight. Thank you, Ari. Sending you all so much love today. Bye-bye. Oh, boy. Chad, it's Santita Jackson. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How you doing?
I am doing well. Let me ask you this, and I'm so sorry about these issues. Should I, try to go to a studio? The problem is because you don't have anyone there, I'm trying to figure out how I'd be able to get my guests on, or should I pre-record as late as I can a YouTube show?
I'm not as good on the tech side to know enough about what options are for the guests. Brett would know.
Let me reach out to Brett then, because if either pre-record a YouTube show or if I can go to someone's studio, challenges because you all don't. I'd have to find out how to get the audio.
The same way we can get audio if you're in a studio, we can get it. We can find ways. I believe, but Brett would know more on that stuff.
I'll call him.
He's in after 9 today.
I'll call him shortly.
Okay, thanks, Santita.
No, I'll call him, and once I speak with him, I'll circle back with you.
Perfect. Sounds good. We'll be in touch.
No, thank you for your patience. Bye-bye.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh, and just so that you know, I'm having a home studio set up by iHeart. Oh. Never mind. Okay. That's it. I'm gonna go ahead and get that done today. Okay. Sending y'all so much love.